10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we are live, a special episode of Islands in the League. This is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, joined by my dear acquaintance, Richard Jefferson, 6:55 in the morning in Hermosa Beach, California. I know you guys had some fog yesterday. How's the weather today?
It's the same, and I set my alarm for 6:52, so let's go.
It's the June gloom, man. I lived Manhattan Beach for 4 years. It's the June gloom. And
it's heavy, it's thick, but then you'll get like one day. But I don't think these people want to hear me complain about living in Hermosa Beach. They don't. You know what? I've read the room.
Yeah, I saw some videos from a previous weekend that was fairly recent. You guys just hanging out on the rooftop with a nice clear day. Looks fun. Thanks for the invite.
Honestly, I would never invite you. That's why it was fun. I'm going to be really honest. I would not invite you under any circumstance.
We're going to preview Game 5 of Wolves and Mavs. This series going back to Minnesota as the Wolves avoided a sweep in Game 4. I want to ask you your sort of biggest thing, or it could be a takeaway from Game 4. It could be something going into Game 5 that you'll be looking for. The biggest point I want to make, and it's particularly important in this series because of the nature of each game and how these games have ended. Coaches always talk about starting and finishing quarters well. You can create margins there. And big picture in this series, the first 3 games, the Dallas Mavericks finished the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter really well. It's why they got up 3-0. It's why the Wolves won Game 4, because they outscored the Mavs. I think it was 10-8 over the last 3 minutes. So how each team finishes the quarter, I think, is huge. We just haven't seen much separation between these two teams within the game. The point I want to make, at the end of the second quarter of Game 4, Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, all in foul trouble. And it was Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, and Naz Reid. And the Mavs, I believe, had a chance at the end of that second quarter to create a little separation. And they did not. And we went into and that's a credit to the Wolves, of course. I thought the defense over that stretch was really good. Luka had an offensive foul. But the ability to close quarters and start quarters well, it's the game within the game. And the Mavs lost that game in Game 4. And I think that is going to be a point of emphasis tonight, how you close and start quarters. And the Mavs, look, they didn't do a great job of that, particularly, I thought, at the end of that second quarter.
You can look at it, the last 3 minutes of every single game have been the somewhat of the deciding factor. Those three specific plays. You score, they don't. You turn it over, they score. Now all of a sudden you're in a difficult spot. But going back in the postseason, we saw that in the Knick Philly series, the last 2-3 plays. What was going on? Was there a timeout? Was there a foul? We've seen it. We saw it in this Boston series. Boston, Indy had an opportunity to be up 2-1 in this series, if not for the final 2-3 plays. They had an opportunity.
They had an opportunity to be up 3-1, Richard. They nearly won Game 4 as well.
But to my point, 2-3 plays.
I'm agreeing with you.
I know you are. You're hyping me up even more. I haven't even had my coffee yet. But when you get to this series, it's always been, hey, this, Ant and Cat aren't playing well. It's like, yeah, but you could not play well and then get to the final 3 minutes, and then we're going to make the plays that are needed. And they just haven't. They hadn't all game. Luka hits the big 3, but there were multiple opportunities for them to go and respond, and they haven't. This was the first game where they actually made the plays. That was the difference. You can talk about the second quarter and that opportunity to get the gap, which is true. But I think the last 4 games has proven whichever superstar, whichever player makes the plays in the last 3 minutes is going to dictate the level of success for their team, and that's the end.
And I don't think it necessarily has to be the superstar scoring the basketball.
Yes.
It could be the superstar setting up another star or the superstar setting up a teammate. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Jason Tatum's pass to Al Horford.
Yeah. Jaylen Brown's pass to Derek White. Boom.
Yes. It doesn't. The superstar making the play that leads to the play or making the finish. I'm just adding to the point.
And I think this is a good, I'm glad you brought this up because I think this is something that as I've watched this series, I'm not going to say I've been frustrated at times, but it has bothered me with some of the spacing around Anthony Edwards. In particular, I think Karl-Anthony Towns for the first 3 games did not do a good job of creating space at the right angles, sometimes even just being in the right spot. There was, I can't remember which game it was. I think it was game 2. There was a left slot ISO. Karl-Anthony Towns was the next guy on the left side. There was no one in the left corner, and he is spaced to 20 feet. He's not even on the left wing. Like you have to allow Anthony Edwards room to operate. He was better in game 4. He had three fourth quarter threes off of Anthony Edwards' pass. The thing with Cat, if he is going to be the next man, and corner aside, if he is going to be the next man, to me, he's at his best when he's spacing to like 27 feet, a la Kristaps Porzingis. And Karl-Anthony Towns is better at attacking closeouts than Kristaps Porzingis, and he had some success in game 4. So his spacing, like if I'm watching one particular nuance tonight, beyond just the obvious, which is how does Minnesota guard Luka in pick and roll, which we'll get to in a second. That's the biggest thing. How is Karl-Anthony Towns spaced? Where is he spaced? Is he the next guy on Anthony Edwards? Is he in the high quadrant? Is he spaced to 27 feet? Does he have enough room to actually attack a closeout when they close? Those are like big things to me. And it was better in game 4. And I think that's one of the reasons he shot it better.
Well, the frustrating thing about that, and really, in my opinion, I love Cat and I love his improvement. I love his growth, his maturity of understanding he is number 2 in this pecking order. Because for a player of his caliber and his age, that can be tough to admit, right? It's my franchise. Another kid comes in, but we'll be better if he's the lead. I think that's Cat's position. That's his specialty. Like, you're a shooter. You have to know what shooters do and how to space the floor, how to cause chaos with your movement. I'm a slasher. I got to know when to cut back door. I got to know when to slash. I got to know when to go when my point guard. That's my job. Cat, your specialty is spacing the floor as a big. So when your spacing is messed up, and sometimes it's because he's tracking to the ball and he wants it, or, he's just looking to set a screen. It looks like he's kind of in between what he wants to do, right? And so it's just, that's the frustrating thing about the Cat. Defensively, he does some things that's going to get you some charges. He's going to do some things like foul at half court, and you're just like, and then he goes on the other end, and then offensively, he's okay with his reading of his spacing. If he did a better job of that, he would get more points and his teammates would get more points.
I think it's particularly noticeable and important at this stage of the season. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
Like against the Wizards, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Doesn't matter.
Against the Dallas Mavericks defense, it has to be perfect. Even there was a play earlier in the series, Edwards right slot drive this time. Cat was in the left slot. The low man came over to help, and Anthony Edwards tried to make the wraparound skip pass to the left slot. Yeah. And Cat never created the angle to make the pass, and it was 3 feet left of him. Ball goes out of bounds. Anthony Edwards turnover. To me, it was the right read from Anthony Edwards. Cat never moved off his spot. He's got to create the angle. It's simple stuff like that. And it's going to be big again. It's going to be big. The Dallas Mavericks defense is so loaded to Anthony Edwards at all times. Cat as a spacer is so important.
But it's the reading that's what I'm saying. It's like we all have our specialties, right? There's hybrids across the board, but we all have our specialties in a manner of like, this is what I do, this is what you do. His specific job is a stretch 4, stretch 5, space the floor, extend the defense, find the gaps. That's your job. And sometimes it's like, we segment like specific jobs that we have and that we want to do, right? Whether it's defensively, okay, these are my main responsibilities. So for him to be at this point in time in the postseason, still not getting to those slots and not getting to those spots and reading the defense, that part is a little frustrating.
I like Anthony Edwards the last 2 games. Just in terms of the aggressiveness, and I know there were some turnovers mixed in, particularly in game 3, but just in terms of the aggressiveness, the passing, the playmaking, this guy's averaging over 8 assists. So he's taking advantage of the way Dallas is covering him, particularly in ISO. There's that clip that went viral of Kyle Anderson, who was in the left corner, and he's, instructing the shoot. Where did RJ go? RJ, did we lose you? You look so good. We got to see that face. There he is. There he is. There he is.
Yeah,
but Kyle Anderson, and the Kyle Anderson ended up setting a flare screen. They got a corner 3 out of it. Anthony Edwards made the right read. So I think, again, we've talked about it throughout these playoffs. Like, he's figuring out playoff defense in real time. First time really going through it. I know he went through it, for 5 games last year against the Denver Nuggets. But this is like legitimate growth in the middle of it. So I like what I've seen there the last 2 games. Luka pick and roll coverage. Game 3, they mixed it up, I want to say, as much as any game against Luka all season long in terms of switching, drop, blitzes. They played a lot of drop in game 4. They won the game. I would expect them to sort of return to that. It's interesting. I want to get your thoughts on this because people talk all the time with great players. It's like, well, you got to mix it up. You got to mix it up. Against a guy like Luka, against a guy like Jokic, I even think Embiid this year, when you mix it up now, it's like, well, they've seen everything. They can make the read in real time. They don't need 5 possessions to figure it out. Once you do it, they know how to attack it and exploit it. So to me, it's at times maybe you mix it up, but to me, it's like we are committed to this and we are taking something away because this is why we are doing this. So I don't necessarily like, hey, we're just going to, who said it? Somebody said it to me the other day. Oh, it was Joe Mazzulla in a pregame meeting. He's like, we're talking about the Pacers, but he's like, the Pacers create a bunch of noise. And if you try to take away everything, you're going to end up taking away nothing. And sometimes I think with great players, they create a lot of noise. And if you try to take away everything by mixing it up, you take away nothing because they're just too damn good. So I would expect Minnesota to play a lot of drop again in game 5.
Greg Popovich, one of the things that I liked about the defense, that one of the schemes that we would do it with Chris Paul, where we'd be in a certain coverage the whole game, bring us in. He's like, only on this possession, repeat after me, only on this possession, we are going to blitz him. It would be the first possession of the 4th quarter, right? Just this possession. And then we're going to go back to our normal coverage. And what he would do is this will be the first time he's seen the blitz. Now the next 2 possessions, he's coming off looking, trying to coming off a little okay, are they going to blitz me? And then we're back into our normal coverage. So then he looks at his I just bought 3 plays. I just bought 3 plays without their focal point being aggressive, knowing what to do, what the coverage is. I bought 3 possessions, and that's the chess match, right? To your point, yeah, if you're constantly mixing it up based off of who you got, I think, and the Miami Heat do this really well. What we do is what we do. We just need to do it harder. Like Eric Spoelstra, Pat Riley, that's who they are. Like, and so they switch, they tweak, but ultimately they're very big on we just need to do it better. So I don't want to switch everything up. I don't want to switch everything up constantly, but trying to buy 3-4 possessions like Pop used to do, I love that.
The other thing about constantly mixing it up, and I agree with you on you should at some, like, we're going to blitz Damian Lillard on the first 2 pick and rolls of the game, and then we're back to our normal coverage, right? Teams used to, against me, like out of an ATO, they would say with the Joel Embiid handoff, like, we're going to go under the first one. And it would fuck me up a little bit, right? Because they had been chasing all game, and I wasn't ready to shoot against the under, right? Now, if you did it the next possession, I'm going to shoot a 3. Like, I'd be ready for it. But to your point, it buys you a possession, right? So I like it. The other point about constantly mixing it up that I think, so let's assume the screener defender, in this case, a lot of times Gobert, and the guy on the ball, a lot of times McDaniels, they know what is going on, right? They know we're switching. They know we're in blitz. They know we're in drop, right? And you're constantly mixing up. Chances are those two guys are on the same page.
Yeah.
If you're constantly mixing up and you're making substitution and the game's flowing, so you got to rely on the other 3 guys to know exactly what coverage you're in every single time. And good teams, for the most part, are going to be able to do that, but it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. That's to your point about Pop in an ATO or at the end of a quarter. That's why it's important.
Yeah. And I would say it's easier to do it when it's lineups, right? Like when so-and-so comes in the game, we're going to go into this coverage, right? So now the whole team, whoever's in there, knows that this offensive player triggers a coverage by the entire team, because they know, sometimes it's players off the bench that can shoot, or
not shoot. In the Boston Indy series, every time TJ McConnell checked into the game, Boston immediately went into a zone. That's an example of this. Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's the opportunity that those are the opportunities that I like. Those are opportunities that I like. To your point, switching it up, and some people use the term without specifying switch it up, like it's just play different defenses. It's like, no, there's more layers to this. There's more layer to it. It's like,
right, if you have a non-shooter on the floor, I'm comfortable, like, let's blitz until this guy checks back out of the game.
Okay. If you tell me it's that type of switch it up, okay, now I'm listening. But if you just say switch up defenses, these dudes will carve you apart so quickly. Have fun doing it. It's not just about changing different defenses. It's they're offensive.
It has to be strategic.
Complex. Yeah.
Yes.
They're offensively.
Yes. And this is, by the way, I'm not implying at all that Minnesota is not doing this. It's a general comment about people who always say, well, you got to mix it up against great players. Okay, that's fine. It's a fine statement. You just have to be strategic about it. We've lost RJ again. He's back. RJ, I know you got to take your kids to school. I just want to make 2 more points.
Forget them kids. They're fine. They can walk.
One is quick. And I would just, the point I want to make is I would expect a Kyrie Irving bounce back game tonight. The other point I wanted to make, and I think we've seen this, and it goes back to the star player making the play for the role player. Boston Indy series, game 3, it was Al Horford. Game 4, it was Derek White at the end, right? To me, this game, like a lot of these playoff games, will come down to who wins between the role players, right? Jaden McDaniel, Naz Reid, Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. On the other side, PJ Washington, who didn't have a great game 4, but has been excellent throughout these playoffs. Derek Jones Jr., Daniel Gafford, Maxi Kleba,
Hardy,
Hardy, who had a nice game 4. That to me is just as important as, does Luka play well or does Ant play well?
That's where I was a little bit Rudy apologist. It's like I was a Rudy apologist the prior few games, because I was like, wait a second. Ant and Cat are shooting historically low, and we're over here talking about Rudy. It's like that, and I get why there's a conversation about Rudy, but of the slices of the pie, if they were doing their job, there would be less pressure on him to do his job, which he's doing okay at. I think he's doing a good job given, what he's, playing in the postseason and people constantly attacking, like going a step back against Luka. I thought it was good defense, as good as you could play. There could have been sending two at the ball, maybe getting it out of that monster's hand, because him one-on-one at the top of the key, I just don't
nearly anybody. Yeah.
Yes, I versus anybody. I don't care who. I'm taking Luka in that position. So to me, when I look at the game, it comes down to the stars doing their job, and then the support around them. Who is going to be that? Like Naz Reid had a 7-3 game, and they lose that game. Why? Late game situations, late game things that, you kick it off to Naz Reid. You do. Edwards was not looking aggressive. He looked out of sorts. So the stars still have to be stars. But
Naz Reid got a grenade at the end of game 3. An absolute grenade.
1000%. This wasn't even like a pull the trigger and throw it. It was like a pull the trigger, hold it, then play catch. I want
to know how you look so good so early in the morning. I need to know your secrets. Do you have a eye mask when you sleep?
It's genetics. I'm gonna be really honest. That's and right. I have these really cool lights.
Oh, okay, it's the lighting. It's the lighting.
The lighting.
I've still got the purple mood lighting in here.
Glows, though. There is a glow about me.
Yes, I've noticed.
You've noticed there's an. Would you call it an aura?
You always have an aura. You were made for this. You were built for this.
God.
All right. Richard Jefferson, thanks for joining. This has been Islands of League presented by DraftKings Sportsbook.
I've never liked you.